Hi, I'm Liv and welcome back to the Book Nook. Okay, my feet are like super cold, so I'm going to put these on. They're like little slipper boot things and they're so cozy. They've got fleece lining. Oh yeah. Hey guys, so it is day 19 of Vlogmas and today is the closest I have come yet to not filming a video because I am exhausted. Even though I didn't have an early start today, we had a late start, starting at 10:30. Couldn't sleep last night, then the washing machine woke the cat up at 5:30, which meant the cat woke me up at 5:30. And today has been very, very busy. My voice is a bit croaky, and like throughout the day, as I've been on the tills, more and more talking I'm doing, I've noticed my voice getting sort of groggier and groggier and groggier. So that's fun. So I got home tonight and I'm absolutely shattered and I was struggling to think what to do for a Vlogmas video today, and I thought what I would do is just do a little video about some of my favourite podcasts that I like to listen to, because after I mentioned What Page You On podcast in one of my previous videos, I had a couple of people saying, you know, what other podcasts are worth listening to. And I thought this time of year, you know, people might be travelling to and from sort of families' houses and, you know, from place to place, might be doing a lot of travelling and might just want something nice and fun to listen to. So I thought I would go through some of my favourite podcasts because I've mentioned a few sort of here and there in a few videos recently. So I thought I'd just run through a list. I love a good list. So I have a coffee and a list. Let's get cracking. So the first one I'm going to mention is one that I have mentioned before, and that is No Such Thing as a Fish. Now this is a podcast run by the guys who are the QI elves. They are the researchers for QI, and it started a few years ago, just 4 of the guys in the offices in Covent Garden talking about some of the most interesting facts they found out during the course of researching for that series of QI. And then it's just gone from there. It's gone from strength to strength. They now do live shows. A lot of them, it's really annoying, they do their live shows at Up the Creek Comedy Club in Greenwich, which when I used to live in Greenwich, you know, I used to go there a few times, and now I don't live there anymore, and every time I hear they're Up the Creek, I'm like, oh. And some of my mates who still live sort of Greenwich way have been to 1 or 2 of the shows, and I'm very jealous. So it's a really great podcast. It's really fun. It's informative. You get to know the guys if you listen to it sort of from the beginning like I did. So I came to it pretty much as it started, I think. It was one I'd heard about, but it was actually while I was doing my 3rd year of my undergraduate degree that I was really listening to this. I realised in another video, I think I said that it was during my MA, but actually, looking back on it, it was my 3rd year of my undergrad. I would use that one for some downtime, that and a couple of others, which I'll mention in a minute. I had sort of 3 podcasts that were my go-to when I was going on my walks to sort of clear my head. I would be listening to them. So I go sort of chunks of the time, not listening to them, and then have some episodes to catch up on. And you just kind of get to know the guys, and you just feel like sort of family and friends, and yeah, it's really clever, really fun, really good one just to check out. You'll just learn lots of sort of useless knowledge, but that's really interesting to find out about, and as I say, it's a really good chuckle too. Next one I'm going to mention is another one that I listened to a lot during my 3rd year of my undergrad, a lot of the ones on my walks, and that is Answer Me This. Now this is a podcast done by Helen Zaltzman, who's the sister of Andy Zaltzman, who used to do a podcast with John Oliver called The Bugle. Now Andy Zaltzman still does The Bugle, and he's been on lots of other sort of TV shows as well. So Helen Zaltzman is his sister, and Ollie Mann, who has been a radio DJ on various radio programmes and has done sort of a couple sort of television things, I think, as well. And it is basically a podcast that these guys have been doing for years, where people basically write in with questions and the guys answer them. Simple as that. So you'll get questions, anything from, you know, sort of quite factual-based questions to sort of hypotheticals where someone's got like a tricky situation and wants some advice. And it's another one where you get to know the guys. Now, I didn't start listening to it from the beginning, and when I started listening to it, they didn't have sort of like their full back catalogue available. Now you can download, I think for sort of 79p for a chunk of episodes, they're really sort of previous episodes, but it's really worth checking out and downloading as many back as you can, because again, it's a really funny one. They have really funny jingles as well. They have like comedian friends will do jingles for the podcast, so people like Josie Long have done them, and I can't think of any other names now, but they're really fun jingles. And then you've got Martin the Sound Man as well, who was actually Helen Zaltzman's husband, who does all the sort of sound stuff, and he also chips in, and he's just brilliant. And yeah, it's another really good fun one. You will find out lots of facts through that one as well, but it is just a really good fun one to sort of while away the hours. I should say most of these are comedy podcasts. I probably should have said that right at the beginning, but the majority of these are comedy podcasts. For me, there's something so kind of perfect about podcasts and comedy. I know that might sound either really obvious or really stupid or both. But podcasts and comedy, you know, it is like listening to a stand-up comedy routine. And a lot of the time I will listen to some stand-up comedy routines as well. But there's just something sort of so symbiotic about comedy and podcasts, and I just think it's a really great way of, you know, getting some laughter in your ears and out your mouth and something. So most of the podcasts I listen to are comedy ones. There are some non-comedy ones that I have always meant to get round to, but never sort of fully got on the bandwagon. So things like Serial, I've never quite got on board with. I think it's because the more serious the podcast, the harder I find to pay attention. The good thing about comedy podcasts is actually if your attention wanders, you don't always miss too much that's sort of vital, whereas if it's something that's sort of a real fact-based, serious podcast, if your attention wanders, you miss stuff, and my attention does wander. Anyway, sorry about that interruption. The next one is also a comedy podcast, and it's called Do the Right Thing. Now this one, it's not releasing episodes as regularly as it used to because the guys that do it have got a lot else going on, but essentially it is a comedy panel show, and it is rude, it is bizarre, it is brilliant, it is offensive, and just amazing. It's, yeah, some of it's not for the faint-hearted, but it's just so ridiculous. So essentially, it's Do the Right Thing. There are lots of sort of different rounds, but it's all based around doing the right thing. So it's things like, what is the right thing to do in this situation? But the situations themselves get like more and more convoluted, or the preamble to the situation is more and more convoluted and just talks about you have to listen to it to understand what I mean. So the guys that run that are Danielle Ward, Margaret K. Smith, and Michael Legg, who you may have heard on sort of other comedy podcasts and comedy radio shows and things like that. And they're just absolutely fantastic. It's bonkers. It's one of my favourite ones to just listen to with a kind of expression on your face that's like, what the hell is going on? It's just amazing. So go check that one out as well. Because they don't upload so regularly, you have got like a definitive backlist to sort of catch up on. What's there is what's there. And there is also a Christmas special that they have just put out, which is well worth a listen to. So that one is their latest one. Then another comedy one, they're all comedy ones, is one that I've only gotten into recently. So the next one is one that you've probably all heard of, and it's actually just me being extremely late to the party, and that is My Dad Wrote a Porno. So I only got into this in the last sort of 6 months or so, blitzed series 1 and 2, and then had finished those in time for season 3. And oh my giddy aunt. In case this cultural phenomenon passed you by like it did for me initially, and you've been resisting, I was resisting because it just sounded like really weird, but it's absolutely amazing. Essentially, there's a guy whose dad wrote a porno and sort of published it on the Kindle or what have you on Amazon, and it's him and 2 mates, and they sit and read it. And one of the guys on it is Alice Levine, who is a Radio 1, I think, DJ, and the guys all know each other. They've all been sort of friends for years since uni, and it is just absolutely hilarious. The porno itself is just awful. The writing will make you feel ill. It just doesn't make sense, but it's just amazing. And the reactions of the 3 guys to anything that happens is what makes it for me. It's just absolutely superb. So if you've been kind of on the fence about it, just go for it and you will not regret it. The only thing you will regret is listening to it in earshot of other people. When I was binge listening, it was one that it was like a book that I couldn't put down. So all I was doing was listening to it and I just couldn't stop. And I did have to say to my parents a couple of times, if you hear something really weird and like dodgy, it's this podcast, and I had to explain to them what it was about because I just thought, someone overhears that. And occasionally at work I've been listening to it in the staff room, and as soon as I hear a door open or footsteps in the hallway, I'm just like, pause, which probably actually makes it worse. But yeah, it's the funniest thing. You will howl with laughter, you will cry, you will feel more than faintly nauseous on many occasions. Again, there is another Christmas special out at the moment, this second Christmas special, and it's so worth a listen, so do that. Then 2 that are kind of linked that I want to mention. The first one is the Guilty Feminist podcast, and the second is Global Pillage, and they are both created and run by Deborah Francis White, who is just absolutely fantastic. Now, Global Pillage is a comedy panel podcast, and it's an inclusive one where essentially they try and avoid having any straight white men on it at all. It's a sort of cultural comedy podcast, so you learn things about lots of different countries. You also learn sort of idioms from different countries and cultures, and it's really, really fantastic. Really recommend that one. But my favourite of the 2 is The Guilty Feminist, which is a podcast that explores our noble goals as feminists and the hypocrisies and insecurities that undermine them. I've always wanted to say that. So it was originally created by Deborah Francis White and Sophie Hagen, who's a brilliant comedian, and that's how I sort of first got into it. And it is a podcast that explores feminism in the modern world. And there's not a lot more that I can say about it than that, really, because each episode does something different, and it now has guest hosts because Sophie Hagen stepped down from the regular hosting with Deborah Frances-White. So now there are a sort of series of regular rotating co-hosts, if that makes sense, who host that with Deborah, and it's just fantastic. Each episode deals with a different theme. They've done sort of theme specials. So they've done anti-Trump ones after that election. They've done anti-Brexit ones after, or sort of emergency post-Trump and emergency post-Brexit episodes. And it's just absolutely fantastic. It's incisive, it's funny, it makes you think, you learn about a lot of stuff, especially sort of campaigns to do with sort of FGM, and period poverty was the most recent episode, which is talking about the fact that quite a lot of young girls in the UK will miss school because they can't afford to buy sanitary products for their periods and things like that. There's a lot of really good charities that they get involved and talk to. Again, there's a lot of inclusivity on that one. There's a lot of transgender guests that have been on, and it's just absolutely fantastic. It's a multifaceted one that is one of the ones that sort of makes me think more, but at the same time, Deborah Frances-White is a stand-up comedian, and a lot of the co-hosts are stand-up comedians as well, so it's funny, so it doesn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time it is serious, so I really, really recommend The Guilty Feminist. Then a few BBC comedy podcasts that I listen to, so I'll always listen to the Friday Night Comedy, BBC Friday Night Comedy on Radio 4, which it rotates between the Now Show, the News Quiz and Dead Ringers, and is always fantastic. So the news quiz is hosted by Miles Jupp and does exactly what it says on the tin. It's every week. It's a funny look at the news from the week, and it has a series of different guests on there. Then the Now Show is Hugh Dennis and Steve Punt talking again about things from the news that week, but also sort of a broader look, and it has guests on and do sort of little sketches and bits like that. Really good fun one. And then Dead Ringers, of course, is the John Culshaw sort of impression show. So I'll always listen to those ones, and then I will always listen to I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue. I've only recently started listening to that one in the last sort of year or so, so of course I don't get a lot of the sort of historical jokes in there, but it's just absolutely bonkers. That one's hosted by Jack D, and I can't remember exactly when that one's on, but there's always like some episodes available on the Radio iPlayer. And then I'll also listen to Just a Minute as well. That is possibly my favourite one, Just a Minute. I bloody love it. Can't decide who my favourite guest is on that one. Like, Giles Brandreth is annoying, but he was always good entertainment value. Sue Perkins is always bloody brilliant on it, and actually so is Pam Ayres. So in terms of bookish ones, I have to confess that other than What Page You On podcast, there's not many that I listen to particularly regularly. Why did I miss a U out there? Regularly. With the exception of The Readers, which is one that is hosted by Simon Savage and Thomas... Oh, I've forgotten his name. I've forgotten his surname. I'm so sorry, Thomas. Oh, dear. But that one's been going for quite a while. Simon Savage used to host it with Gavin, whose surname I've also forgotten. I think it's because Simon Savage as a name just trips off the tongue so easily that I forget other surnames in proximity. Any of you are watching and familiar with Simon Savage, you'll probably already be familiar with The Readers, but it's one that I definitely urge you to check out. And as I say, other than that, and What Page You On podcast, literary ones, bookish ones, I tend to listen to as regularly because I tend to sort of consume a lot of it on BookTube instead. But ones that are worth checking out, the London Review Bookshop podcast, I've downloaded a few episodes of those. They do it sort of quite regularly. Again, I'm having trouble with that word. They do it quite frequently, but I tend to only download episodes that have got authors that I'm particularly interested in hearing about. So at the moment I've got an episode on here that's Ali Smith and Olivia Lang. Ooh, there's a Mary Beard one. Let's download that one. But yeah, they do a really good podcast of events that happen in the LRB bookshop, so that's one worth checking out. Again, some of these bookish ones you guys have probably heard of. Then there's Literary Friction, which is actually a sort of talk show that's broadcast on NTS Radio. Then there's a podcast episode of it as well, and it's really worth checking out. It's Carrie Plitt and Octavia Bright who interview an author and then talk about that author's books and a theme, and it's another really interesting one that's well worth listening to. Most recent episode up is with... Is it Kynan Jones or Sinan Jones? How do I not know this for definite? Talking about the novella. So that's a really interesting looking one. I haven't actually listened to that one yet, but I'm going to soon. Then Shakespeare and Company, the bookshop in Paris that everybody wants to go to. Ooh.
Hello and welcome to the Shakespeare and Company Readings podcast.
There we go, just accidentally pressed play on the beginning of that. But yeah, Shakespeare and Company have a podcast as well, where, a bit like the LRB, they will record sort of events that go on in the bookshop and put it up as a podcast. So that's a few literary-based ones that I have not mentioned before, but What Page You On podcast and The Readers are definitely my two favourite lit podcasts. So yeah, something a little less bookish today, but just as much me, and as I say, I was struggling to think what to do for today's podcast that was sort of low energy, low impact for me, feeling quite tired after today. So there we go, a list of some of my favourite podcasts. I really do urge you to check them out. I will, of course, put all of the links to the various podcasts in the description thingy down below, but basically most of them are searchable on either Apple Podcasts or SoundCloud or your chosen podcasting app of choice, your chosen one of choice. Well done, there's a redundancy. So I hope there's something in amongst that list of things that sounds like it might be your kind of thing. Do let me know if you listen to any of these, have a little chat with me. If any of you guys have listened to the Christmas special of My Dad Wrote A Porno yet, please talk to me, because my mate in work who also listens to it is saving it, so I haven't had a chance to talk to her about it. So if anybody has listened to it, please talk to me. Yeah, have a chat with me in the comments below. What podcast would you recommend? I know things like Serial are really, really popular. Is it worth sort of persevering and pushing past this kind of reluctance I have with slightly more serious non-comedy podcasts to get into it? Try and talk me into it if you can. But yeah, any other podcasts you'd like to recommend to me, let's have a chat in the comments below. Thank you for bearing with me on this not so bookish Vlogmas vlog day. 19 vlog today, not so bookish. I will be back tomorrow with, we're going up earlier in the day, my Winter Cozy Reading Night TBR, because of course tomorrow, the 20th of December, is Winter Cozy Reading Night, as hosted by the wonderful Lauren over at Lauren and the Books. So this is something that happens between 7 and 10. Are we GMT or are we... We're definitely not BST, are we? It's definitely not summer. So between 7 and 10 UK time, London time, you just sit and you read some books with candles and cosy snacks and things like that, and it's just lovely. And I'm so excited to be joining in because, as I say, I don't have to work on Thursday. I've got the day off, so I can actually come home from work on Wednesday, knowing I've got the day off, and just chill with books and candles and snacks. And I've already got my snacks in. I got them in a while ago and some of them I have eaten, so I might have to replenish, but I've already got snacks ready. I've got an idea for what I'm going to cook for dinner to eat before Cozy Reading Night, so I'm very, very pumped. Very, very pumped. Very pumped indeed. So yeah, I will see you tomorrow for my Winter Cozy Reading Night TBR. Hope you're having a good Vlogmas. We're nearly at Christmas, not long now. It really feels like it in the bookshop. So thank you again for watching, and then you shall see me tomorrow.